Hi. So in this episode, I just want to very quickly kind of go over SEO and kind of my predictions for it and where I think it's going in 2021, and most importantly, the elements of that that you need to be aware of and kind of thinking of in your business as we go into the next year. Um, I don't think there's anything particularly revolutionary here. I think it is just a real definition of the gradual improvements that we're seeing from Google. But I want to just put that in a frame of kind of give some reasoning behind that and why I think that is the case. So firstly, I'm going to start off with the big question, which is what is SEO? This is a question that I think quite often gets misconstrued or kind of it's not looked at properly enough. The reality is that people think that SEO is about optimizing your website for search engines when it's really not. I think that's a very small part of it, and certainly for big technical sites, there might be technical limitations there that you have to take into consideration. But for most people, it's actually about optimizing your website for your users. By optimizing your website for your users, by using the right keywords, the keywords that people are using to search, and by giving a good user experience, you're going to get better SEO. You're going to get more traffic from organic search because your website is fundamentally a better experience for Google's customers, which are also your customers. By making your website easy for your users and for Google to understand, which is what it's all about, it means that you're going to kind of see that increased amount of organic traffic, and it's really about making sure that your website is structured in a way that makes sense to both people. Something that's only good for Google and something that's only good for users isn't necessarily going to work. Google more and more is acting like a human, so doing something just for users is probably going to be your best bet. Anything that is good for customer and user experience is going to always win over something that is purely good for SEO. Historically, things that are good for SEO don't tend to last very long because SEO people tend to break the toys that they're given. So you want to make sure that your website is very natural, is good for your users, and makes sense. Anything that doesn't look right or doesn't look kind of very natural is normally going to be bad for your SEO at some point as well. This is what I wanted to talk about as well today, is that the line between search engines and real customers is essentially blurring. Google is getting better and better at acting like a real customer and like a real user and understanding the website in a way that it would load on their iPad, on their phone or on their desktop in the same way that it does for them in the real world. There are many ways that it tests that in practical senses, but essentially those are the main takeaway is that Google is getting better and better at blurring that line and between what is real and what is real for your customers and real for Google. One aspect of that brings us into focus is Core Web Vitals. So in 2021, this is going to be becoming a ranking factor. It's only going to be fairly minor, but it's a good example of something that shows us the direction that Google is going in. It brings in 3 new core metrics and 3 kind of metrics that it's measuring website technical performance on, and that includes SEO. So the first one is LCP, which is largest contentful paint, which basically means how long for your main content to load. How long does it take for the bulk of that web page to load so that I know what it actually is that I'm looking at. FID, or first input delay, is when can you first use the page? What is the first point at which I can start interacting with the page and using it for the purposes that I've arrived at that site for? CLS stands for Content Layout Shift, which is when does that page stop moving? When does the page when is it stable for me to be able to interact with it? And I know that if I press something on my mobile, it's not going to suddenly jump around. Those 3 things are very technical, and there are many ways that it can be measured on a website, but essentially it is just about how quickly can you use it. When can you actually use the website and achieve your goal of visiting that website? And if suddenly things are moving around, and that might be for various reasons, technically, ultimately that metric is measuring does it move around at all, and why is that happening? Don't worry too much about Core Web Vitals because they are very technical metrics for developers to ensure that basically websites are performing well and it has a good user experience. As I mentioned earlier with the content layout shift, a good example of that is if a page loads, then a cookie banner comes up and then a newsletter banner comes up, suddenly you can't actually click or interact with the content. That's quite a bad user experience, and I think you'll have all experienced times like that when using a kind of an e-commerce site or a website, and then suddenly you're trying to click on a product to look at it or add it to basket, and then suddenly something pops up and moves it all around. That's what these metrics are there to measure. The technical implementation and the technical way of fixing those is not something you should be too concerned with, because that is for your technical and development team to implement. I'm going to shrink my face slightly there. There we go. This is a statement from Google. So Core Web Vitals measures dimensions of web usability, as I've mentioned, such as load time, interactivity, and the stability of content. So your users don't accidentally tap the button when it shifts under your finger. How annoying. That is a direct quote from the Google guidelines, so that clearly suggests that that is their main battle, that is the main fight they're trying to win against, is that they want users to actually have a good experience on the website, and the people who are finding websites through Google search are having a good experience with that. So to give two examples here of what good and bad might look like, a good kind of experience would be that a page loads really quickly in under 2 seconds. You can read what it says, and you can easily take the action that you need to do next. Whether that is looking at more information, clicking on another link on that page to find out more information, to add to cart, or to sign up, whatever it is. That interaction could be a 10-minute journey throughout the website, or it might be a 2-second thing where it's like, I just want to book this restaurant and get out of there. A bad user experience is that where two pop-ups might pop up and overlay each other, so you can't dismiss them correctly. As the page is loading, it's shifting around quite a lot. It takes 4 seconds to load because there's a massive image on the page. Then when you go to click a link, another pop-up suddenly appears and you can't actually interact with it. So I think those are two really good examples, and ideally it's that, good websites, you won't even notice they're good because you'll be able to get in and get out and do what you need to do without thinking about it. Whereas bad websites, you will start noticing them much more because it's very frustrating for you to try and use them and achieve your goals. So how are Core Web Vitals measured? There are two main ways that Google is going to be measuring these things. One is in lab, so that basically means within Google Chrome you can run like an experiment, or there'll be certain tools out there where you can run an assessment of your site. The other one is in field, and certainly this forms part of your Google Search Console report, where you can then look at the real-world data that Google is kind of collecting from users and report back on that. If I'm losing you at the minute, don't disappear. I'm going to step back from the kind of the technical side in a minute, but just so you know. One of the other things that's been recently announced is Google Passages, and this is a really interesting announcement from them because it kind of builds on that Core Web Vitals assessment. So here's an example of where you might be searching for a specific question. Google identifies that text, and then as part of that search result, you can kind of see that text. Then when you click onto the page, it highlights it in yellow and kind of drags you down to that specific point. So we know that it's being able to read pages, understand the text on them, and therefore, if you ask a very specific question, such as how to charge an electric car, or how to paint a red wall or something like that, it will scan and read content and then be able to deliver you to the exact answer that you are looking for. This passage announcement that came out in early October, about 2 weeks ago, so early October, really builds on that. So what Google Passages is going to do is it's going to, one, affect 7% of searches, which might not sound like a lot, but that is a huge amount of searches per month that are being made. But rather than like on the previous slide where it was indexing the entire page and kind of showing you it was understanding a specific part of the page but then linking through to the entire page for you to read, it is now going to be able to index just subsections of single pages. That means that it's even more specific and even more accurate at being able to understand a web page, the content it's about, and therefore what part of that text is going to be most relevant to you as a consumer. So what we're seeing here again is that one step closer to Google acting like a real human and acting like a user and being able to understand data and understand the content on your website as if it was a human. This also means that then Google can start ignoring the rest of the page. So in terms of being able to find some information about something, it's just going to be far more specific and far more unique in terms of the content it creates. So does this really change anything for you? What should you be doing to try and kind of meet this new optimization? Ultimately, this doesn't change anything. It's just a further demonstration of kind of Google acting like a human and Google's ability to understand text and content as users would. So again, going back to what we said at the start, build your website for Google and users. So if your users can understand it and it makes sense to them, the likelihood is that Google's going to be able to understand it really well as well, and therefore you'll get higher SEO. These measurements are going to start becoming into a ranking factor in 2021, so it's important to be mindful of them. As I say, the Core Web Vitals thing measures basically user experience, and the better user experience you give, the better results you're going to see, and you're going to be able to rank for SEO in 2021. So these are some tips that I would give you in terms of what's coming in 2021 and how to start preparing for it. Put your customers first at everything you do. That is the core element of this. And structure your website in a way that makes sense and is sensible. It's really as simple as that. People think that SEO is overly technical and overly complicated, but if your content is easy to read, makes sense, and has got good headings and good structure to it, Google's now going to be able to read that and understand it much better than before. And by putting your customers first, you're always going to be making decisions that are good for them and therefore good for your SEO. Write about stuff that your customers care about. So research and kind of empathize with your customers to make sure that you're writing blog posts that they actually care about, that the content out there that you're writing is informative and educational as well as entertaining. But ultimately, if people are searching for problems and you can provide the answer to those problems, you're going to see more traffic as a result. Make your website easy to navigate. So again, Google will, if a user can't find a page on your website, it's likely that Google is going to probably find it because it's got more technical ability than your users have, but it's not going to be able to assess that page or it's not going to deem that page as very important because it's suddenly, if it's hidden on your site, then why would it, if a user can't find it, why would Google want to rank it? Answer the problems and concerns of your customers. Make the website a pleasant place to be. No one likes pop-ups that are quite aggressive and constantly getting in the way of what you're trying to do. So even if it's maybe driving some sign-ups, the likelihood is it's making a lot more people angry that are silent. Make the website easy to use and load quickly. Don't use massive images. Use images that are appropriate for the size and make sure that the navigation, the buttons and stuff are easy to see. Don't try and trick the system. Google is cleverer than you are. Google is obviously crawling millions of pages a day for billions of people and has got thousands of very technical engineers working on it. You can't beat the system, and any SEO trick, hack or quick win will always basically be just that. It will be a flash in the pan. Eventually Google will catch up with you. So long term, always put your customers first in any SEO activity you're doing, and then you'll gain the results over time from that. Invest in understanding your website and build a website for them. I kind of can't emphasize enough how much that is important, and a lot of the work that I do in terms of keyword research and keyword understanding for my clients is around that. You need to be able to have an understanding of your customer. We want to be using that search data to really inform us of what customers' problems are, so we can respond accordingly and we can build a website around them, and that's what's going to be successful. And importantly, on that note, SEO is not a silo. You can't just do SEO and it acts as this kind of imaginary thing over there that's being handled by someone that doesn't impact the rest of your business. It's not a one-off task. The market changes. Your customers are changing. They're going to get more educated over time, or they're going to get less educated on new products that are coming into the market that maybe only you know about. SEO is about making your business a joy to experience. By creating content that you want them to read, a website that works for them, and just generally fixing their problems, that's going to create joy with your customers, and you will be able to see the benefits of SEO as a result of that. Google, again, to reiterate this point, is that it's acting more and more like your customers. So if you can be joy and deliver a joyful experience to your customers, then you're probably going to be delivering a joyful experience to Google as well, in the fact that they can crawl the site, they can assess it, and they understand that it is a good website to be on and that people are going to be enjoying it, and therefore they're going to reward you over a site which is not necessarily quite as pleasant to be on because it's got 10 pop-ups that are annoying. So in conclusion, to get SEO ready for 2021, it is very simple. Put your customers first, understand them, empathize them, write content for them, build your website around them, and then you'll start benefiting. Google is acting more and more like your customer would. Therefore, by putting your customer first, you're also putting Google first. I hope that's helped. If you've got any more questions on Core Web Vitals or on the Google Passages announcement, please do let me know. Just drop me a message on LinkedIn. That's the best way to get in touch with me at the minute. Thank you very much.